The House Judiciary Committee room fell dead silent. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett leaned forward into her microphone, her eyes locked on Jim Jordan like a laser beam. What happened in the next 30 seconds will become the most watched political clip of the year and leave one of Congress's most aggressive questioners completely speechless. Mr. Jordan, Crockett said, her voice steady but carrying an edge that made everyone in the room sit up straight. You want to talk about accountability? Let's talk about your accountability. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Jim Jordan, the Ohio congressman known for his explosive questioning style and ability to bulldoze through any opponent, suddenly looked like a deer caught in headlights. His usual confident smirk vanished. The papers in his hands started to shake slightly. What Jasmine Crockett had pulled out next wasn't just a document. It was a political nuclear bomb that would detonate live on C-SPAN, leaving Jordan with absolutely no way to respond. And if you think you've seen political takedowns before, you haven't seen anything like this. The security cameras in a room captured every micro-expression on Jordan's face as realization slowly dawned on him. His trademark aggressive posture began to crumble. The man who had spent years perfecting the art of political intimidation was about to discover what it felt like to be on the receiving end of real accountability. Staff members in the gallery started pulling out their phones, sensing something historic was about to happen. Even a usually stoic C-SPAN director began switching between camera angles more frequently, instinctively knowing this moment would be replayed millions of times. Before we dive into this incredible moment, hit that like button if you want to see more moments where politicians get exactly what they deserve. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss these epic political showdowns. Trust me, you're going to want to see how this unfolds. To understand why this moment was so devastating, you need to know who these two people are and why this confrontation was years in the making. Jim Jordan has built his entire political career on being the aggressor. The former wrestling coach turned congressman from Ohio made his name by attacking everyone who stepped into his committee room. Whether it was Dr. Anthony Fauci during CO hearings, former FBI officials, or anyone who dared challenge a Republican narrative, Jordan was known for one thing: relentless, rapid-fire questioning that left his targets scrambling for answers. Jordan's reputation preceded him into every hearing room. Witnesses would spend days preparing for his onslaught, knowing that he would interrupt, deflect, and attack rather than seek genuine answers. His staff had perfected a system of providing him with sound bites and attack lines designed more for cable news clips than actual oversight. It was political theater at its most aggressive, and Jordan was the undisputed master of the craft. The Ohio congressman's signature move was a rapid-fire interrogation technique, asking multiple loaded questions without allowing time for complete answers, then using the witness's inability to respond quickly as evidence of guilt or incompetence. He had turned congressional hearings into gladiatorial combat, where himself always cast as the righteous warrior, exposing corruption and lies. Jordan's style was simple but effective. Interrupt constantly. Don't let anyone finish a sentence. Ask loaded questions. Raise your voice. Make accusations. And never ever let up. For years, the strategy worked. Democrats would stumble. Witnesses would get flustered. And Jordan would walk away looking like the hero to his base. He was untouchable in these hearings. Or so everyone thought. Then there's Jasmine Crockett. The freshman congresswoman from Texas arrived in Washington with a completely different energy. A former public defender and civil rights attorney, Crockett had spent years in courtrooms facing down hostile prosecutors and aggressive opposing counsel. She wasn't just another politician reading from talking points. She was a trained legal warrior who knew how to think on her feet. Unlike many of her Democratic colleagues who seemed intimidated by Jordan's aggressive style, Crockett approached congressional hearings with the same methodical preparation she had used in courtrooms. She understood that the key to defeating an aggressive questioner wasn't to match their energy, but to be better prepared, more precise, and absolutely unshakable under pressure. Crockett had also studied the psychology of bullies, both from her legal training and her personal experience growing up in challenging circumstances. She knew that bullies like Jordan relied on intimidation and the element of surprise. Take away those advantages, and even the most aggressive opponent could be neutralized. But here's what made Crockett dangerous to someone like Jordan. She had done her homework. While other Democrats often seemed unprepared for Jordan's attack style, Crockett had been studying. She knew his patterns, his weaknesses, and most importantly, she had been quietly gathering information that Jordan probably hoped would never see the light of day. The stakes of this particular hearing couldn't have been higher. The House Judiciary Committee was investigating claims of political weaponization of the Justice Department. One of Jordan's favorite topics. He had spent months grandstanding about how Democrats were using federal agencies to target conservatives. It was his signature issue, his chance to shine in front of the cameras and prove his conspiracy theories. Jordan came into this hearing expecting another easy victory. Another chance to dominate a witness, control the narrative, and walk away looking like the tough guy fighting for American values. He had no idea that Jasmine Crockett had been waiting for exactly this moment, and she was about to turn his own weapons against him in the most spectacular way possible. The visual contrast between them said everything. Jordan, the pale, intense wrestling coach in his rumpled suit, always looking like he was about to explode. Crockett, composed, professional. Her legal training showing in every gesture, sitting quietly while Jordan prepared to launch his usual attack. One represented the old way of doing politics, loud, aggressive, and often substance-free. The other represented something new. Prepared, precise, and absolutely deadly when provoked. What Jordan didn't realize was that Crockett wasn't just another target. She was a prosecutor who had been building a case, and he was about to become the defendant. The timing couldn't have been more perfect for this confrontation. Jordan had been riding high on recent committee victories. Feeling invincible after several successful hearings where he had dominated witnesses and controlled the narrative. His confidence was at an all-time peak, which may well was about to happen even more shocking. Crockett, meanwhile, had been quietly observing Jordan's tactics for months. She had studied his patterns, analyzed his questioning style, and most importantly, she had noticed something that others had missed. Jordan's entire approach was built on the assumption that he would never face the same scrutiny he dished out to others. That assumption was about to be shattered in the most public way possible. The hearing started exactly how everyone expected. Jim Jordan was in his element, firing off accusations about the weaponization justice, demanding answers about investigations into conservative figures, and generally working himself up into his typical aggressive frenzy. "This is exactly what we're talking about," Jordan declared, his voice rising as he pointed dramatically at the witness panel. "The Biden administration has turned our justice system into a political weapon. They're going after their opponents while protecting their allies. This is banana republic stuff." The Democratic members of the committee sat mostly quiet during Jordan's opening tirade. This was standard operating procedure. Let Jordan exhaust himself with his opening theatrics, then tried to clean up the mess afterward. But Crockett wasn't following the usual script. She was taking notes, checking her phone, and occasionally glancing at a thick folder beside her with what looked like a small smile. Jordan continued his performance, moving from general accusations to specific attacks on the Justice Department's handling of various investigations. Where are the investigations into Hunter Biden's laptop? Where are the charges for the real crimes? Instead, we're seeing political prosecutions of Donald Trump and anyone who supported him. The Republicans on the committee nodded along enthusiastically. This was red meat for their base. Exactly the kind of content that would play well on Fox News and conservative social media. Jordan was building to his usual crescendo. The moment where he would demand answers from witnesses who couldn't possibly respond to his satisfaction. But then something unexpected happened. During a brief pause as Jordan shuffled through his papers, Crockett requested to be recognized. The gentlewoman from Texas is recognized, the committee chair announced, slightly surprised. It was unusual for members to interrupt during Jordan's opening statements. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman," Crockett said calmly. "I just want to make sure I understand Mr. Jordan's concerns about accountability and political weaponization, because I think we need to have a very clear discussion about what that actually looks like." Jordan looked annoyed at the interruption. "Mr. Chairman, I haven't finished my opening statement. The gentleman from Ohio can continue after the gentlewoman from Texas finishes her point." The chair replied. Crockett nodded politely. "I'll be brief. Mr. Jordan, you've spent the last 15 minutes talking about accountability and the weaponization of justice. You've demanded investigations. You've called for transparency, and you've insisted that no one should be above the law. Is that a fair summary of your position?" Jordan sensed a trap but couldn't see it coming. "That's exactly right. Equal justice under law. No one gets special treatment based on their politics." "Perfect," Crockett said, making a note. "So, you believe that when someone in a position of authority has knowledge of serious wrongdoing and fails to report or take action, that person should be held accountable?" "Correct. Absolutely," Jordan replied, his confidence returning. He thought he was back in control of the narrative. "And you believe that someone who enables or covers up wrongdoing, especially when it involves the safety and well-being of vulnerable people, should face consequences for that failure?" "Yes, 100%, Jordan said, his voice getting louder. "That's exactly what we're fighting for here." The Republicans on the committee started nodding more enthusiastically. It looked like Jordan was winning this exchange, turning Crockett's questions into an opportunity to reinforce his main points about justice and accountability. "Excellent," Crockett said, reaching for a folder. "Then I think you'll be very interested in what I have here." That's when the mood in the room started to shift. Something in Crockett's tone made everyone pay closer attention. Jordan's confident expression began to flicker with uncertainty. "Mr. Jordan," Crockett continued, "since you're so passionate about accountability for those who fail to report wrongdoing, I'm curious about your thoughts on a specific case. What's your position on authority figures who receive reports of sexual abuse and fail to take appropriate action?" Jordan's face went pale. That's a hypothetical question that it's not hypothetical at all." Crockett interrupted smoothly. "I'm talking about very specific documented cases. Cases where people in positions of trust receive credible reports of sexual abuse and either fail to report them to proper authorities or actively discourage victims from coming forward." The room was now completely silent. Even the usual background noise of shuffling papers and whisper conversations had stopped. Everyone could feel that something big was coming. Behind the scenes, longtime congressional staffers were exchanging knowing glances. They had seen countless hearings over the years, but the energy in this room was different. There was an electricity in the air that only appeared before truly historic moments. Some of the more experienced staff members later said they could actually feel the power dynamic shifting in real time. The press gallery, which had been relatively quiet during Jordan's opening theatrics, was now fully alert. Reporters were frantically typing notes and preparing for what they sensed could be a career-defining moment for both politicians involved. Jordan tried to regain control. "Mr. Chairman, I don't see how this relates to the matter before us today." "Oh, it relates perfectly," Crockett said, opening her folder. "Because you spent this entire hearing demanding accountability for people who abuse their positions of authority. You've insisted that no one should be above the law. You've called for investigations into anyone who uses their power to protect wrongdoers or cover up crimes." She paused, looking directly at Jordan, "So I'm sure you'll have strong feelings about what I'm about to share with the committee." The tension in the room was now electric. Jordan was shifting uncomfortably in his seat, and for the first time in anyone's memory, the man who had built his career on aggressive questioning looked like he wouldn't be anywhere else in the world. Crockett held up a document. "Mr. Jordan," Are you familiar with the lawsuit filed against Ohio State University regarding sexual abuse in the wrestling program during the time you served as an assistant coach? Jordan's face went from pale to red. Those are baseless allegations that have been. Are you familiar with the testimony of multiple former wrestlers who stated that they reported concerns about the team doctor's behavior to coaching staff, including you, and that no action was taken? Those allegations are false, Jordan said. But his voice lacked its usual conviction. Are you familiar with the testimony stating that you personally were told about inappropriate conduct and that your response was to laugh it off or change a subject? That never happened, Jordan insisted, but he was now clearly rattled. Crockett wasn't done. Mr. Jordan, you've built your entire political career on demanding accountability from others. You spent today insisting that people in positions of authority must be held responsible when they fail to protect vulnerable people. So, I'm curious, what accountability have you taken for your own failures in this regard? The room was dead silent. Republican committee members were staring at their desks. Democratic members were trying not to smile. And Jim Jordan, the man who had terrorized witnesses and dominated hearing for years, looked completely and utterly lost. He opened his mouth to respond, then closed it, opened it again, then looked around the room as if hoping someone would rescue him, but there was no rescue coming. Jasmine Crockett had just turned his own weapons against him, and everyone in the room knew it. What happened next will go down as one of the most devastating moments in congressional hearing history. Jasmine Crockett wasn't finished with Jim Jordan. She was just getting started. The parliamentarian, who had overseen thousands of congressional hearings over the years, later described his moment as unlike anything he had ever witnessed. The complete role reversal. Seeing Jordan transform from aggressor to victim was so stark that it felt almost surreal to those watching in person. Even seasoned political reporters who had become accustomed to Jordan's dominance in these settings found themselves leaning forward in their seats. This wasn't just another political moment. This was a masterclass in how preparation and precision could overcome bluster and intimidation. Mr. Jordan, Crockett continued, her voice remaining perfectly calm while Jordan visibly squirmed. Let me read you something. This is from the lawsuit filed against Ohio State University. Quote, multiple student athletes reported directly to coaching staff, including defendant Jordan, that Dr. Strauss had engaged in sexually inappropriate conduct during medical examinations. Jordan tried to interrupt. Those are allegations in a lawsuit that, I'm not finished, Crockett said firmly, and the authority in her voice made Jordan actually stop talking. Quote, despite receiving these reports, defendant Jordan and other coaching staff failed to take any meaningful action to protect student athletes or report the conduct to appropriate authorities. She looked up from the document. Mr. Jordan, this lawsuit includes testimony from 8 former wrestlers, 8 young men who say they tried to report sexual abuse to you and other coaches and that you failed to protect them. 8 victims who say their trust was betrayed by the very people who were supposed to keep them safe. The color had completely drained from Jordan's face. He was gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles were white. Now, Crockett continued, earlier today, you demanded accountability for anyone who fails to protect vulnerable people. You insisted that people in positions of authority must be held responsible when they don't act on reports of wrongdoing. So my question is simple. Why should anyone listen to your demands for accountability when you failed to provide it yourself? Jordan finally found his voice, but it came out as barely more than a whisper. Those allegations have been thoroughly investigated. And have they? Crockett interrupted. Because according to my research, you've never testified under oath about what you knew and when you knew it. You've never provided a detailed accounting of what these young men told you and what actions you took or failed to take. She pulled out another document. In fact, the only public statements you've made have been through your spokesperson or in brief comments to reporters. For someone who demands that everyone else testify under oath and answer detailed questions, you've been remarkably reluctant to submit to that same standard yourself. The Republicans on the committee were now looking genuinely uncomfortable. This wasn't going according to plan at all. Jordan was supposed to be the aggressor, the one asking the tough questions. Instead, he was being systematically dismantled by a freshman congresswoman who had clearly done her homework. Mr. Jordan Crockett said, "You spent your entire congressional career demanding transparency from others. You've insisted that people in positions of authority answer for actions. You've called for investigation after investigation. So surely you understand why the American people might want answers from you about what you knew about Dr. Strauss. And when you knew it." Jordan was now visibly sweating. "I've answered these questions. I've been clear that I never saw any abuse. And if I had, I would have reported it immediately. But that's not what the victims say, is it?" Crockett responded instantly. "They don't say you saw abuse. They say they told you about abuse. They say they came to you, their coach, someone they trusted, and reported that something inappropriate was happening. And according to their testimony, you did nothing." She leaned forward slightly. "Mr. Jordan, imagine if someone came before this committee today and said, 'I never saw any corruption, so I couldn't report it,' while 8 witnesses testified that they had specifically told that person about the corruption. What would your response be?" Jordan opened his mouth, but no.